I'm Larry Steinhouse. I am the co-founder of Investor Schooling. Bill Falcone and I, we run this business. He's my business partner. How do I say that? Business partner. And together we run this a company called Investor Schooling. We teach people how to invest in real estate, how to invest in the stock market, how to invest in stock options, how to make a ton of money. And if you were just on the lunch show, you saw some of the things that we were doing. We're making a lot of money. I mean, just an incredible month. We're killing it. But at the same time, we want to teach this to you. We want to teach you how to do it. One of my favorite ways to buy houses is buying houses subject to. And I want to talk a little bit about that because this is one of the most missed ways and most missed opportunities to buy houses. So the first thing I want to do is I want to talk a little bit about the fact that I am not an attorney. I am not an accountant. I'm giving advice based on my experiences and successes. I do not claim that anything in this presentation is legal advice, estate advice, or tax advice. Please feel free to check with your accountant or attorney before using any of the techniques discussed in this presentation or any techniques I ever discuss with you. Stock options and real estate investing have inherent risks, and these should not be taken lightly. Any claims made in this presentation are my results or the stated results of students. Your results may differ. Results are also based on effort. I promise that if you do nothing, your results will be nothing. If you actively learn and participate in any program, your chances of success will increase dramatically, but are not guaranteed. Like with any program designed to help your financial success, you need to be prudent and responsible for your actions. All right, check it out. You ready? Who agrees? Real estate, the best investment you will ever make. By the way, if you guys want to make comments or ask questions, just go to the comment box and feel free to do that. And I will take a look at them every once in a while and see what I can do to answer the questions. See this? This is great. There is a sound going on right now, and it's really weird because it kind of changed and it's going to change back really, really fast. And this sound is shh. And that sound is the sound of the real estate market being sucked out from underneath you. What's going to happen real soon, and it should have happened this year, but it just changed, believe it or not, for COVID. It actually got better, but it is going to get worse, is the market's going to start to go at its peak, and it's going to start to go down. And this becomes an awesome opportunity for you to buy houses, not because of what you think. You think you could buy houses cheap. No, I think I could buy houses for free. Anybody want a free house? Yeah, I think I just heard a collective yes. All right, first of all, I want to tell you a little bit about my story. So my story is real simple. This was my first house when I was 18 years old. And it's kind of interesting. I was working for a company called Crazy Eddie. If you guys ever heard of Crazy Eddie, I was making $5 an hour. And I just want you to understand that that was above minimum wage at that time. Minimum wage at that time was $3.35, and I was making $5 an hour. And at that point, I had a couple of people who was working with me, and they were telling me about how they were buying houses, and they were making money on houses, renting them out, fixing them up, and renting them out. And I'm like, well, they could do it. I could do it. So I started looking for a house, and I find this house. And actually, the story is, at the time, I was working out in some gym in Princeton, New Jersey, where I used to live near Princeton, a town called Plainsboro, which is right next to Princeton. And I was working out at the gym. And you guys all know that when you're riding one of those stationary bikes, you want to be able to read something, maybe, right? And I didn't bring anything to read. So in front of the gym, they had those real estate magazines. It's funny because I don't even know if they have them anymore. They had those real estate magazines, and I pulled one of the real estate magazines. And I start flipping through it, and I find this house in Easton, Pennsylvania, listed for $26,500. So I look at the listing, and I'm like, what is this? This is kind of cool. Maybe this is one of the houses I can buy. So I call the real estate agent. Now, remember, I had no money. I was making $5 an hour. I call this real estate agent, and I said, hey, I want to buy this house. And they said, okay, come down and see it. Now, I didn't realize that Easton, Pennsylvania was an hour and a half away from where I lived with no traffic. But I drive all the way down there. She shows me 3 houses. She goes, which one do you want? I go, well, I'll take the one that was listed. And she goes, okay, great. She goes, she writes up the offer, and she says to me, real simple, she says, I need a check for $500 to furnish money. And I look at her and I go, I don't have $500. And she says, well, do you have $100? Well, I'm too embarrassed to tell her that I don't have $100, but I write the check anyway and figure I'll get it to clear before she needs it. So I write the check, and then the next thing you know, I actually end up buying this house. Now, what's interesting about buying this house was I read this book. Right after I bought the house, I read this book by Robert Allen. If you guys ever read the book, Robert Allen book, No Money Down, I actually read how I did it. And it was kind of cool. And making a long story short, I actually bought the house using a FHA loan and credit cards. And the funny thing is, 38 years later, I'm teaching people how to buy houses with credit cards all the time. So it's kind of interesting that just followed through. So here was my strategy. My strategy was a buy and hold rental strategy. I did this for many, many years. And I did this from 18 to about the year 2006, 7, 8 was my strategy. And the strategy went like this. The rent paid the mortgage. The property values would increase. And of course, the rents would increase. And I'm telling you right now, this is a long-term, little risk way to make money in real estate. And it's a great way to make money in real estate. And I suggest all of you do it. Even if you guys are wholesaling, start owning property. Start buying properties to buy and hold, because this is how you build wealth. This is how your life changes. This is how all of a sudden you realize that you have millions of dollars in equity in houses, and they weren't millions of dollars in equity in houses only 5 years ago. 5 years ago, it was maybe a couple of $100,000 in equity, and all of a sudden it's millions of dollars in equity because you paid the loans off or you paid the loans down and the property values increased. Every time I look at my property values, you know, a year goes by, another year goes by, another year goes by, I'm like, wow, this is amazing how much money this is increasing. So I decided in 2006 to change my strategy. And here's what I changed my strategy to. You ready? It was called the stupid and greedy strategy. And here's how the stupid and greedy strategy works. You buy overpriced houses. By the way, a lot of you guys are doing this right now. Be careful. You don't get enough cash flow to pay the mortgage. You speculate that prices will always increase. And here's an interesting thing about the speculation of prices that will always increase, right? If you guys are buying Bitcoin, this is what you're doing. The same market is the Bitcoin market. And I'm not telling you Bitcoin is not a good place to invest. I'm just saying that you think Bitcoin's going to go up every day and all the time, and you're buying it and thinking that's going to happen. It's the same thing with this right now. With the houses, in 2006 and 7, people were buying houses. They would buy houses for $100,000, and a week later, it was worth $150,000, at least in their mind. And that's what was happening to me. I'm like, wait a minute, this has never happened before. I've never seen houses move this fast. I should stop buying these houses, and they'll be worth $150,000 tomorrow. Well, that's not exactly what happens. But I'm going to tell you that when you do this strategy, this is a very short-term risk and high guaranteed failure way to invest in real estate. So when I did this, we all know, right? What comes next? Well, 2008 comes next. And when you do this greedy and the stupid and greedy strategy, this is what happens to you. You go bankrupt, just like I did. And in 2008, I lost everything. I lost everything. All my houses, as a matter of fact, it was kind of interesting because in 2008, when I went bankrupt, there were so many bankruptcies that they were having them in hotel rooms. And they're having them in hotel rooms with, like the banquet rooms and hotel rooms. And there would be audiences of, 50 to 100 chairs set up. And when I did my bankruptcy, I was actually the first one in line. And I turned around and I'm sitting there. I'm actually sitting there with the trustee in front of me, my attorney over here. And I was the first case. And because I was the first case, people started filling in the rows behind me. And I didn't know they were filling in the rows behind me. One point during my bankruptcy, I turned around and I looked and I saw everybody's had the same expression on their face. They were all like this. But me, I realized that, hey, I'm done. I get to start all over tomorrow. And that was great. Now, I'm not suggesting you go bankrupt, but I am suggesting that if you're in a situation where you have to, you can rebuild. And believe me, it's been great. So in 2009, I'm broke with no credit. In fact, in 2009, I had a 420 credit score. I know I had a 400 because the very next day after my bankruptcy, I went to a Toyota dealer and bought a car. And you're like, what? How do you buy a car the day after your bankruptcy? By the way, that's one of the first smartest things I did the day after my bankruptcy, because I went there. The guy says, he looks at my credit. He goes, you have a 420 credit score, sir. I'm like, yeah, I know. He goes, I got to sell you this car at 24% interest. I'm like, oh, great, you can get me a loan. He goes, it's 24% interest. I'm like, great, you can get me a loan. He's like, it's 24% interest. I go, great, you can get me a loan. And he didn't understand what I was doing. He was like, okay, sign here. And I paid that loan off in 1 year. But the cool part about that was it was the beginning to rebuilding my credit. Because when you draw that line in the sand, you got to rebuild your credit. And that was how I did it. I started rebuilding my credit. Now my credit score is well over 700. And by the way, for you guys who don't know, I have almost $700,000 available to me on just credit cards. So when I teach you how to buy houses with credit cards, believe me, I'm doing it. I do it all the time. It's freaking awesome. All right. So again, I'm 2009. It's broke without credit. What now? Well, here's the thing, right? I'm an entrepreneur. I'm always going to be an entrepreneur until the day I die. And I also have a passion for real estate, right? So I want to be able to do this. I want to be able to learn how to buy houses. So it turned out to be really great because I wanted to learn how to do subject to properties. But I want to talk a little bit about what a good deal is. So before we even go into subject 2, let's talk a little bit about what a good deal is and what a good deal is for you and a good deal for me. Now, normally I play a little game with the audience. I don't know if I have, if the audience can actually respond to me, but we'll have a little bit of fun with this. And then you guys tell me what you think. So let's talk about what's a good deal. So let's play Would You Buy This House? So I want to put this house up and let's talk about this house. This house is an asking price. And by the way, when I show these houses, I want you to understand that this is the price you have to buy it for. You can't buy it for anything less. You can't negotiate it. They're in a neighborhood that you would buy in, whatever. You know, it's fine house, and anything unless I tell you otherwise is okay. But here's the deal: this is the asking price of $179,000. It's worth about $225,000. It rents for $550. By the way, it's a 2-family house and a pizzeria. So in front of it, you can see there's 2 families, and over here is a little pizzeria over here. And here are the rents. It rents for $550, $850, and $750. Well, I just realized how much more rent I'm getting on this. Anyway, it's fully occupied. The tenants pay all utilities, right? And basically, would you buy this house? So when you give those numbers, if anybody online wants to say that they would buy this house, say yes. And if not, that's okay too, because I'm not sure if we can interact fast enough. But let's talk about this for a second. So if you said yes or if you said no, I want to talk about something called the 1% rule. And by the way, so if we talk about the 1% rule, the 1% rule says if the monthly rent is 1% or higher than the purchase price, it's probably a great cash flowing property. So if we take a look at this property, we can actually see that the total rent is $2,150 and the asking price is $180. That's a really good deal. That means that this property will probably cash flow and make a lot of money. In fact, it probably did, right? All right. So here's the problem, though. Could I buy this house? First of all, the asking price is $179. Remember, I can't negotiate it. Even though it's worth $225,000, it's a little tough to get a loan, especially when I have to come up with $54,000 just to buy this house, right? Just to buy this house, I got to come up with $54,000, and I'm going to pay about $10,000 in fees for the loan. And here's the problem: I got a 420 credit score. How am I going to even possibly qualify for this house? All right, so let's take this one. Would you buy this house? The asking price is $200,000. It's worth about $185,000. It rents for $1,395, and it's not occupied. Right? So, what do you think, Joseph? You just said you would buy the last one. Would you buy this one? Asking price is $200,000. It's worth about $185,000. It rents for $1,395, and it's not occupied. Would you buy this house? So let's see if he can answer while I take a sip of my coffee. Anybody else want to say yes or no? All right. I'm going to assume that most of you would say no to this house. And that makes total sense, right? You're going to say no. The asking price is $200,000. It's only worth $185,000. It rents for $1,395. It's not occupied. It's a tough one, right? All right. So let's also go on to this. Remember that the asking price is $200,000, and remember I can't negotiate that price. The value is $185. It rents for $1,395. It's not occupied. And again, okay, so Kimberly says no, she wouldn't buy it, and Miss Hunter says no, of course not, right? And look, it's actually they're all saying no now. Right, there you go. So here you go. So you got a down payment of $40,000, and you got $15,000 because you got to put in $15,000 more because it's under appraisal, about $6,000 in fees, and once again, of course, with a 420 credit score, I'm not qualifying. That's quite obvious. All right, so let's go to this one. And if you guys, as soon as I put it up, as soon as you guys see the screen, start answering so we can get the answer quicker. All right, so here you go. Would you buy this house? By the way, this is a condo, and the asking price is $110,000. It happens to be worth $110,000. It rents for $1,200. It's fully occupied, and the tenants pay the utilities. So you guys going to buy this house? What do you think? You guys going to buy this house? By the way, you know, that's it right there. The circle right there. It's in a condo complex. There's 4 units per building. There's 4 units. The one downstairs, that's the one downstairs. It's a 2-bedroom, 1 bath. That's what the kitchen looks like. And again, so are you going to buy this house based on 110? It's worth 110. It rents for $1,200. It's fully occupied. The tenant pays all utilities. So here's my thought. My thought is you're probably sitting there going, I don't know, maybe, maybe not, maybe not, based on the 1% rule itself, right? Of course, right? So it's kind of like if you said yes, you're right. If you said no, you're right. It's not that great of a deal. It's kind of a borderline deal. So you might buy it, you might not buy it. But let's go into this too. Remember, once again, I'm going to have to put down $22,000 plus $6,000 of fees approximately for the loan. And there you go. See that? Yeah, yes, it's based on the 1% rule. Maybe, yes, exactly, right? So would you even qualify with a 420 credit score? I'm sure you guys are all going, hell no, you ain't going to qualify, of course, right? So let's go to this one more. This one, the asking price is $160,000. You guys want to start typing right now, or you can type in anything you want, but that's fine. All right. So this one is asking price is $160,000. It's worth about $140,000. It rents for $1,350. It's not occupied. The tenants pay all the utilities, but look at that kitchen. Can you share that screen for a second? Share that screen for a second for me, Fred. Look at this kitchen. Is this the coolest kitchen you have ever seen? Like, I mean, look how beautiful that kitchen is. That kitchen right there. I mean, look, I told you, the asking price is $160,000. It's worth $140,000. The guy put $25,000 into this kitchen. That's what he told me anyway when I went to see him to look at this property. He put $25,000 into that kitchen. I'm like, why would you put $25,000 into a kitchen in a property that's worth $140,000? And he's like, I liked it. I don't. It was bizarre. And it's a condo. So he obviously got ripped off too if he paid that much money. But all right, so here you go. Everybody's already answering. No. Got it. Very beautiful. All right, shop the shirt. Beautiful. All right. And of course, if we continue on, of course we have the problem where I would have to put $32,000 down. By the way, just so you understand, the $32,000 comes from 20%, but I'd have to put another $20,000 because under appraisal costs, about $6,000 in fees, and of course with a 420 credit score, as you know, I'm not going to qualify, right? Of course, right? Beautiful. All right. So here we go. So let's talk about this. What is really a good deal? And here's an interesting statement. I bought them all. Now, how many of you guys are shaking your head right now going, wait a minute, that doesn't make any sense. How could you buy them all? I bought them all. For those prices and those values and those exact facts, I bought them all. Now, let me talk a little bit about why and how I bought them all and why you would have walked away from awesome opportunities from the 3 that you said no to, or at least the 2 you said no to. The one was borderline. And the first one, some of you guys would have bought it. Some of you guys wouldn't have bought it. But I'm telling you right now, all of those were opportunities. And I got more and more of these opportunities that show up to me every year. I probably do, I don't know, a half a dozen subject to deals a year. And I'm going to explain how and why it works. All right, here we go. I bought them all subject to the original mortgage. And it all started with a conversation that goes like this. What if I took over your title to your house and I took over the payments and you didn't have to worry about it anymore? What if I took title to your house, made all your payments, and you didn't have to worry about it anymore? This is where it all comes down to where you're going to make your money. And in fact, what happens right now when I say, hey, what if I took over your payments and took title to your house and you wouldn't have to worry about it anymore? As soon as you say that, shut up and wait for this response. Can you do that? Can you really do that? Is that something you can do? Something like that is what they're going to say. And when they say that, you just go, ka-ching, because that's when you made your money. And watch this. So basically what you do is you can take the property subject to their original mortgage. So let's talk about the one, let's talk about this one. So I actually ended up buying this one for $35,000 out of my pocket. This is an unusual one. And I have to tell you that usually, and you're going to see them, and I wanted to show you this one because it was the most expensive one out of my pocket. But by the way, the $35,000 came from, guess where? My credit cards. The truth, right? So it came from credit cards. But in this situation, it happened to be that I paid $35,000, and I'll explain why in a little while. But equity also went up $25,000 in 6 months. The payment per month was $1,150, and it actually ended up renting for $1,650, and now I'm getting $1,850 for it. And by the way, this property is now worth $265,000, and that was 5 years ago that I bought this one subject to. This one was $14,000 out of pocket, and this was an interesting one too, where it was only $14,000. It rents for $1,275. The payments were $865 and $250 in association fees, and it cash flowed for about $110 a month. Right now, this property, I just advertised it. I'm getting $1,550 a month, and I had people banging the door down to get in. I actually think I rented it too little. So that's an awesome, and the payment didn't go up. Remember this one, the first one? How about this? I bought it for $1,724 out of my pocket to buy this property. Amazing deal. It had about $40,000 equity in it, and I was making about $40 a month at the time. Remember I said I was looking at this before, and I'm like, wow, I just realized how much money I was making on this property now. My rent total on this property is now $3,200 a month, and nothing has changed. In fact, I now owe about $50,000 less than I did when I bought the property, making the payment on the mortgage. So I actually owe less, and the property value has been going up. The property value is probably around $300,000 now. If you remember, I paid $180 for it, and this is just an amazing deal. Amazing, I love it. This one, you ready for that? How about $950 out of pocket? And just so you know, I like to explain this one. When you get a property under contract, by the way, this was the one that you all said absolutely not to, right? The one that was sold for, I think it was sold for $160, worth $140, right? And here's the deal. This when I went to buy this one, the guy didn't want anything. He just wanted to get out. He just wanted out, right? And the reason he wanted out was he was going to be deployed, and he didn't want to have a property in his name anymore. He needed to go. So it cost me about $5,000 in closing costs. That $5,000 included transfer tax and association fees and whatever, capital contribution, whatever I had to do to buy it. But what was cool about this was when you get a property under contract that you intend to rent, I'm going to tell you a great practice. Put in the contract that says that you're allowed to show it to prospective tenants while it's under contract. So I advertised this property. I had somebody ready to move in 2 weeks before I even bought the property. And I explained to them, I said, look, I'm buying the property in 2 weeks. If it goes bad, I'll just give you your money back. And they understood that, and they signed a piece of paper that said it. But they wanted to move in literally the day that I was buying it. So this is the really cool thing. I said, that's fine under one condition. Understand that I'm not going to have time to clean it. And it was clean, but it wasn't like clean, you know what I mean? It was, it was clean enough, but it needed I like to have my properties thoroughly cleaned. But that day they had to bring me 3 months, 1 month rent, last month rent, and security, and in order to move in, right? So when I took that money out, it cost me about $5,000. When I took the money that they gave me, it ended up costing me about $950 to buy this property. How many people want to buy a property for $950? Yeah, so Kimberly says, instead of making all the money, they were willing to just walk away with nothing. It happens all the time. Happens all the time. I'm going to tell you about what I'm doing right now, but I'll tell you about it in a little while. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to buy the house subject to liens and subject to the encumbrances. So I want to talk to you about a little bit about what this means. And a lot of people understand it once I explain it this way. You guys have heard of what's called a mechanics lien, I'm sure. So when you go buy a property, let's say I'm buying a property from Phil, and the property is worth $100,000. I offer him $100,000. And when the title company comes back, they go, oh, Phil had windows put in his house. He owes the contractor $10,000. He never paid them. The contractor has a $10,000 lien on this as a mechanics lien in the house. What do you want to do about it? So now I have some choices. One of the choices that I have is I can actually say to Phil, hey, listen, I'm going to give you $90,000. I'm going to pay the $10,000 to the contractor. Or I could say, hey, Phil, pay the $10,000 and I'll still give you the $100,000. It's the same thing to Phil either way. Or I could say, listen, Phil, I'm going to take the house. I'm going to give you $90,000 because you owe this guy $10,000 and then not pay the contractor. All I have to do is tell the title company that I'm going to ask them to exclude that from the title insurance. So in other words, the title insurance company is saying to me that they found this $10,000 lien. And I've said, fine, I'm accepting that $10,000 lien. And we all agree that if they go after the property because of this $10,000 lien, that you're not going to cover me in the title insurance because we all agreed to it. So I basically took the property subject to the mechanics lien. Now, when you think about that, you understand that it makes the next few steps, the next things I'm going to talk about, a lot simpler. So the first thing I want you to know is subject to is not assuming a mortgage loan. This is really, really important that you understand this. You are not assuming someone's loan. The loan stays in their name. You're not assuming the loan, but you are making the payments for the seller. So you'll end up making payments for the seller. All right? Subject to is not fraud. All right. One of the things that happens quite often in this business is we go to title companies and we think they're smarter than we are. I promise you that 90% of title companies out there are not smarter than you are. Well, at least I know they're not smarter than I am. They might be smarter than you, but once you take a class with me, you become smarter than them. So some of the title companies may not understand this, may not understand how to do this. I've gotten into Facebook conversations or arguments with title companies that don't know how to do subject to, and they say, well, we have to call the mortgage company and get permission. Duh. That is the dumbest thing I ever heard, because you can't do that. And we'll explain why in a couple of minutes. But it's not fraud. It's totally legal. In fact, on the HUD one, there is a line item. I think it's line item 503 that says subject to. So it's totally legal. Don't worry about it. It's legal. Everything's legal. And if your title company tells you it's not, go to a different title company. If your attorney tells you it's not legal, go to a different attorney. They don't know what they're talking about. All right. Subject to is a legal way to acquire properties, right? Subject to is a way out for many sellers, and we'll talk about that in a minute. So here's how it works. I want to talk about the basics. And this is where, if you're taking notes, if you're sitting down at your computer and you've got a piece of paper and a pencil or a pen or a scribe or a knife in the desk or a marker or crayons, a feather, yeah, whatever. This is where you want to start taking notes, because this is really important. All right, let's talk a little bit about the basics. There are three moving parts to a subject to deal. And I want to talk about each moving part. I want to tell you that the deed, there's a mortgage, and there's a promissory note. These are the three moving parts: deed, mortgage, and promissory note. You need to understand the difference between each one of these things, and I'm going to explain them to you right now. So first of all, the deed is the person who owns your house. The name of the person who owns your house is on the deed. Now, normally in my audience, I ask this question. Hey, if you have a mortgage on your house, how much of your house do you own? So, for example, some people have a $100,000 house, and they just bought the house. They put 20% down. They feel they own 20% of their house because they have 20% down. They owe $80,000. The house is worth $100,000. They feel that the house is, they own 20%. Right? Then you got people who like, I've been paying my mortgage for a long time. I own 50% of my house. Then you got people who, whatever. So then you got people who like try to understand maybe that I'm kind of fooling them, which I am. And they're going to say, well, you don't own any of your house. And then there are people who say that you own all of your house. I'm going to tell you the answer is you own all of your house, no matter how much you owe on it. This is a really important distinction. The person who owns your house is not the bank. The person who owns your house is the person or entity that's on the title, not the bank. So if my name is on a house deed, Larry Steinhouse, and the house is worth $100,000 and I owe $200,000, I own 100% of my house. The bank doesn't own one little speck of my house. Now, there's a difference with a car. And I want to talk about a car because I want you to understand the exact difference. If you own a car and you have a loan in your car, you do not own your car at all. If you owe $1 to the bank, you do not own your car. And I want you to think about this. Who has the title? You don't. The bank does. In fact, when you think about it, if you don't pay your car loan, they repossess your car, right? Think about it. They repossess. That means they took their asset that they own and took it back from you. They repossessed it, right? That's how they get permission to do that. So your loan agreement says that you have permission to drive this car, their car, until you pay it off, and then they give you the title, and then you own the car. So keep that in mind. That it's very different. In a house, you own 100% of the house. The bank owns nothing. All right. So there's something called a bundle of rights. Real estate agents understand. If you're a real estate agent, you went for your license and you got this. And basically what happens is this possession, enjoyment, disposition, the right to sell, exclusive right to not exercise any of these rights. This is really, really important that I want you to understand, because later on I'm going to bring this up again. All right, something called a promissory note. So the promissory note is basically the loan. It tells you what you, if you watch my other presentation, the promissory note will tell you that this is how much you owe, this is the percentage rate, and this is the payments that you're supposed to make. The next thing is the mortgage. So the mortgage is basically a promise. And the promise says that if you have a promissory note and you don't pay it, the mortgage can actually give you, by the way, you give a mortgage, you don't get a mortgage. And the reason you give a mortgage is because you're giving a promise to the bank that says if you don't pay that promissory note, that they have the right to go through a process of foreclosure, get that property back. And that is the difference between, again, owning a house and owning a car. The car, they just take it. The bank has to go through a process called foreclosure. All right. Now, in a subject to deal, the pledge or the mortgage stays with the property, and that's what's important. The pledge of the mortgage stays with the property. So when they say, hey, is the mortgage going to stay in my name? The answer is actually no, because it never was in their name. The mortgage is in the property. The promissory note stays in their name. So when I say I buy the house subject to liens and encumbrances, the lien and encumbrance that I'm buying the house subject to is the mortgage in this case. Remember before we talked about the mechanics lien? In this case, it's the mortgage. So let's talk a little bit about how this works and why it works. So here's another thing too. And I want you to understand this. If you're going to go to somebody and say, hey, listen, I'm going to take the property out of your name. I'm going to put the title in my name, or actually we're going to talk about how to put the title in a second. But you're going to take the property and you're going to put it and you're going to move the title and own the property, and you agree to make their payments. I'm going to tell you right now, if you can't make their payments or you feel that you won't be able to make their payments, please do not do a subject to deal. I'm begging you not to, because you will ruin somebody else's credit. So in other words, if Fred is back there and I buy his house, right? And I buy his house subject to, and he has a perfect credit, and I take over his payments and I decide not to make his payments for any reason, Fred's screwed. So you don't want to do that. You want to make sure that you remember to make these payments, or whatever you can to make these payments. These are the most important payments you can ever make. So there are some negatives to the seller. And first of all, the loan remains in their name, which we just talked about. They also have to explain the loan when applying for credit. So here's an interesting thing. If somebody's buying another house, this loan stays on their credit report, and they may not be able to buy another house. I will tell you there's ways around that as well. And there's also something called the due on sale clause, which is really called alienation clause. And if the bank finds out that they moved the house to somebody else, there's a problem with this. Now, I think I have 5 minutes. Is that right, Fred? I got it. Okay. The only reason I said, because I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to get to everything. All right. So the due on sale clause is basically a clause in a loan that says that the full balance of the loan may be called due on sale upon transfer. All right. But I'm going to rush a little bit because I want to make sure I get to some key points here, because I'm going to teach you a great way to get past the due on sale clause. And it all has to do with the Garden St. Germain Depository Institution Act of 1982. And basically what this says is if you move a property into a trust, your own trust, that they cannot call the loan due on sale, which is a fantastic way to avoid this. And we're going to talk about that. So basically, there's buying property in trust. You heard Phil talk about that a little bit earlier, but I want to go over some of the things real quick. There's 3 parts to a trust. There's the owner, there's the beneficiary, and there is the trustee. Okay, so the owner of the trust is the trust, the name of the trust. So what I'll do is I'll actually buy a property. Let's say I buy the property 123 Main Street. I will buy a property and I will buy it in the trust of 123 Main Street. So if you were watching Phil's presentation earlier, you learned all about that, and you learned that it's an incredible protection vehicle to save you from so many things that can happen to you as a trust, and also isolate your properties. We talk about that all the time. So the owner is the name of the trust. The beneficiary is the person who actually is the person who the entity is being held for. So you could kind of call them the owner of the trust, which is not a bad idea. You call them the owner of the trust, they own the trust, but they have no control of it, which is kind of neat. They have no control of the property. They have no control of the document. The trustee, however, has control of everything. This is the person who the beneficiary trusts to control the property. So here's something interesting too. The trustee is entrusted to not disclose the beneficiary of the property. So if you remember before, we talked about the Garden St. Germain Act that says, hey, if you put a property in a trust, then they can't call the loan due on sale. So basically what happens here is if the bank calls me up and says, hey, I see you're Larry Steinhouse, you're trustee of 123 Main Street, who's the beneficiary? My first response is, I can't tell you, you have to get a court order. So it's kind of cool because that's a pretty good level of protection right there. So remember the bundle of rights, possession, enjoyment, disposition, exclusion, or the right to not exercise any of these rights. Really, really cool about this is the trustee is the one who's in charge of the bundle of rights. So remember we talked about property ownership, so the person on the deed has these bundle of rights? Well, the cool part is in a trust, the bundle of rights is transferred to the trustee, and the trustee has all the same control of the property and doesn't own it. So at this point, I often say to people, hey, how many properties do you think I own? And people will start throwing out, 100, 50, 30, whatever they throw out, whatever they say. But the answer is always a resounding 0. I own no properties. I own 0 properties. In fact, I don't even own any cars. I get to drive, my Corvette, my Mercedes, my Jeep, all my cars, but I don't own any of them. Same thing with my properties. Even the property I live in, I don't own. And it's kind of cool because they're all in trusts. All right. So why would anybody do this? So remember, The loan remains in the name. They have to explain the loan when applying for a credit. They have to share the risk of the due on sale clause. So remember this property? I bought it for $1,724 out of pocket. So here's the story with this property. I'm going to give it to you in a nutshell. Basically, what happened was this was somebody who, when I was in my older business, it was about, I don't know, almost 10 years ago. I was taking her out to lunch because she was a business client of mine. I took her out to lunch. We started talking, and she goes, "Hey, you know something about real estate?" Because I had been investing for years, and she knew me, and we talked about it. And she goes, "I got this property. I don't know what to do with it." I go, "What's the story?" She goes, "Well, I have it up for sale with a real estate agent for $180,000. I owe $180,000 on it, and I don't know what to do with it." I said, "Wait a minute. If you sell that property for $180,000, aren't you going to have to pay all kinds of money to get rid of it?" And she goes, "Yeah, I don't care." I said, "Wait a minute. That doesn't make any sense." So it just so happened that I was at a presentation about 3 weeks before this conversation, and I learned about Subject 2. And it was pretty weird. Guess who gave that presentation? It was my business partner, Phil Falcone, who was giving that presentation. And this was about 10 years ago. And I loved it. I thought it was an awesome presentation. And I looked at her and I go, "Hey, what if I take this property over, take this property, take title to the property, and you no longer have to worry about it?" And she said, "Hey, do that?" And I said, "Hell yeah." So basically, that was my first property that I ever took Subject 2. And if you've heard this story before, unfortunately, I can't go into the whole story, but it's an amazing story how I had to convince her ex-husband, and it's kind of cool. So anyway, that's how I bought this property. She needed to sell it because her husband said basically he's not going to divorce her until the property is sold, and she basically sold it to me, and it was that simple, that quick. All right, this one I bought for $14,000 out of pocket. This was kind of a weird one. This was one where the sister was the tenant, and it was costing the owner $500 a month to let her sister rent from me, and she never pays the rent on time. Well, I took care of that. I told the sister she either pays the rent on time or she's going to have to move. And the sister's been paying the rent on time for the last 7 years now, which is fantastic. Bought this one for $950. This was the guy I told you before. He's being deployed in January, and he can't leave the home vacant. He needed to sell it. He owed too much money on it, and sure enough, I bought it from him. Finally, this one, $35,000. This was a weird one. Usually, it's not this much money out of pocket, but in this case, I had to pay $35,000 because he had a second loan that was due, that had to be sold, that had to be taken care of. So I paid $35,000. So currently, I'm working on a couple of Subject 2 deals right now that I thought was kind of cool. One is a house in Drexel Hill, actually, that I'm purchasing, and I actually said to I'm shocked. The guy's getting $3,500 a month rent for this place. His mortgage payment is $1,100. Doesn't include taxes, but it's $1,100. And I said, "Why wouldn't you just keep it?" And he goes, "I just don't want to be a landlord anymore. I hate being a landlord." And I'm like, "Okay, I'll take your $2,000 positive cash flow. I have no problem with that." And he's like, "Good, take it." So we're closing on that in a couple of weeks. I got another one that I'm closing on in also a couple of weeks. I mean, I probably do a half a dozen of these per year. And if you want to learn how to do this, we are the place to do it. I'm telling you right now, Subject 2 is absolutely a way out for many sellers. And I'm hoping you guys enjoyed that, because if you have a quick question, I'll be more than happy to answer it for you if you want to put it out in the box. And that is Subject 2. That is how to buy Subject 2 properties. And this is my favorite way to buy properties. In fact, it's funny, when I go out and see a property, I expect to buy it Subject 2 at this point, unless the property tells me otherwise. And when we teach here, we teach you different ways to buy properties, and you need to have an arsenal of ways to buy properties. So when you go see them, you can buy them Subject 2 or any other way. So what about you, Nick? Are you out there? You have a question for me? Because you always have a good question. He's probably not out there. He's probably in another presentation. He's probably not paying attention to me once again. That's pretty cool. I'm excited. Well, that's it, guys. So if you guys want to learn more about this, go to investorschooling.com. You can take a free class any Thursday night. You can take it online, or you can take it in person, and I promise you that we will be there. So assuming there's a 30-year mortgage, say 25 years left, how long would you have the property Subject 2? Would you refi? These are actually really, really good questions. Let me answer them one at a time. So again, the question is, assuming there's a 30-year mortgage, say 25 years left, how would you have the property as Subject 2? So I'm telling the people that I'm going to take the property Subject 2 for as long as I want, unless there's a reason not to. So if they say, "Hey, listen, I need you to get out of this property in 5 years," I promise them I will. If not, I'm going to take it forever. Would I refi? I will probably never refi a property that's a Subject 2 property unless I want to pull a whole bunch of equity out of the property. Because why would I want to refi? Most likely that loan is seasoned and I'm paying mostly principal at this point. I don't want to refi it. So next question is, why would anyone keep a property in their credit for 25 years? As long as I'm paying, they don't care. Actually, I've actually had circumstances where I've rebuilt people's credit because I was paying their payment that they weren't paying before. So can you do reverse mortgages? You can't do a reverse mortgage. That's a whole other issue, and there's a whole bunch of rules behind that. So I would stay away from it. And somebody actually asked, do you have a resource that I would recommend do you have a resource you would recommend learning more? Investorschooling.com. Really? Anyway, that's it. See you guys on Thursday. And that's it. Take care, y'all. Am I off? Am I off? Huh? Am I still on? I'm still live? I don't know what Nick's doing either. Hey, wait. Let me do a song and dance. Hold on. What? I'm off now? Wait, I'm still on. Holy cow, I'm still here. So the question is, here's another question, right? After you've done a subject to deal, how do you sell the house after? You sell the house. Who owns the house? The person on the title, remember? You're now on the title. You now own the house. You sell it just like any other house. All right. I'm not sure if I'm supposed to be off or on now, but if you guys have another question, keep asking. Because I don't know what's supposed to do, what's supposed to happen now. But I had a certain time. Hey, you guys, I want to tell you guys something. You guys know about the jackets I wear? Oh, you should see Fred going, oh no, he's going to tell this story again, right? So here's the story with the jackets I wear, right? Do you ever hear the expression, you have to dress for success? Well, let me make sure you understand that you have to be extremely successful to have the nerve to dress like this. But it's no fun when there's no audience. All right. I think, I don't know, man. I think you have to click the Leaf Studio. I think that's how it works. Yeah, at the bottom.